special day for me. I know it's a very special day for you, which we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and his assassination. We celebrate it all. And we have an incredible show for you tonight. A lot of background, not just Martin Luther King, but how the world has become out of his assassination, how it could have been otherwise. And I'd like to, we're going to be talking a lot. We're going to have some incredible images. We're also going to discover, and Clyde's going to bring it up, the real motivation of his assassination. But right here at the beginning, here at Dantes Portland Oregon, I would like for you, if you would, to join me in 1 minute of silence for Martin Luther King. Silence your mind as well as your tongue. 1 minute, please. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll carry on as our brother Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted us to carry on. Bad things happen. The dictatorship goes on. The news of last week cannot have escaped your attention. Our president, Bush, wants to send at least 22,000 more troops into Iraq. There were some words of protest from the Congress, and his reply was, "Fuck you. I'm going to do it anyways." Fuck you, democratic process. Executive signings, I don't know, over 700 in his term. On the day in which we are celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and his assassination, I think it's important for us to know what the struggle is for. We are struggling for our human rights, our civil rights, independent of the color of our skin, independent of our faith, and we are still struggling, and we are losing. We haven't lost yet. But chaos is in our cities. The laws, for all of you who have been here at the lounge, know that the laws have all been implemented for military rule. In the case of riots, in the case of a pandemic, weapons have already been tested against protesters. We say it's not happening, it can't happen. And yet in the same speech that Bush is talking about sending 22,000 troops to Iraq, the message was not Iraq. The message was not 22,000 troops. The message was the Iranians are supplying them. The Syrians are supplying them. Gates and the CIA, the plans have been on the table for a long time. They are preparing the pretexts that we've been talking about at Ground Zero Lounge for some time. We know that you're paying attention to it. We are bringing you the images, the ideas of a free-thinking society. And what Martin Luther King was fighting for, we fight for as well. Freedom of expression and non-violent protest. We are non-violent. We are not advocating any access to arms. And if we stay unified and cognizant and spread the word, we will prevail. The American people, the goodness of the American people will prevail from this dark moment. Thank you. Now, we have a tremendous show for you, full of video extravaganzas and all of the latest ruminations of the founder and star of Ground Zero, Clyde Lewis. Clyde, please come up.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for coming out to Ground Zero Lounge tonight, a special Ground Zero Lounge as we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and a number of other things too. I thought it would be kind of a, it'd be a typical thing for Ground Zero to come out and just, praise Martin Luther King Jr. and just give it all. I mean, he deserves the praise because of what he's done. Today is the day set aside for him. But I think it would leave you all hollow and kind of empty just to have, the typical, let's talk about all the good things he did. Let's talk about the history. Let's look back at what he did. Let's look back at what he said. And it would leave you what you usually get on the nightly news, what I call the pre-approved Dr. Martin Luther King holiday. The approved Martin Luther King holiday, where all you hear about is the I Have a Dream speech, and you see the clips, and you see all the things he stood for, allegedly, all the things that history wants you to remember about Dr. Martin Luther King, all the things that do not interfere with status quo government, that do not interfere with the attitude of equal rights, that don't interfere with the attitude of, they want to put Dr. King in an area where he was fighting against racism, which is only half the battle here. It wasn't all about racism, it was all about his Negro children wanting to be with the white kids. It was more than that. It was more than just hearing him speak. It was the idea that with Dr. Martin Luther King in the picture, there was a feeling of spirituality in the nation that burned for something greater than a government, than a military-industrial complex, than anything that we are being fed now. The jackboot was kept away from us, at least temporarily, while Dr. King was speaking. But as the time went on, after Dr. King had passed away, after he was assassinated, we started to see the deterioration again. And the deterioration continues. And we talked about the idea of race pitted against race, and the idea that here in America we have a siege mentality. A mentality where we always feel like we're under attack. I heard something the other day when I was listening to the radio. It was some guy sounding like a zombie saying, as long as America has freedom, and as long as we're the best at everything we do, we will always be under attack by people from outside this country. I find that quite detrimental to what it is that we want to do here in this country, and that is we want to find ourselves in a place of peace. We want to find ourselves in a place of peace, but instead, this is the image of America now. This is the image we see on television every day on the news. It's a crime blotter report of who's oppressing who and who has decided to go against the norm. Everyone who's decided to go against the norm and they protested or otherwise said, I'm not happy with what's happening, they are the ones that are under the microscope. George W. Bush now can read your mail. Your library books are suspect. Habeas corpus has been dissolved. All the things that we hold here in this country dear to us, our rights, our right to privacy, our right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, are all now suspect because if we allow this, we are signing our death warrant, according to people who have that siege mentality. You see, we have taken our manifest destiny and have turned it completely into manifest hypocrisy. Manifest destiny, for those who don't know, people in America believe that God will always shed His grace on thee because we do what God wants. I said on the Rick Emerson show today that I don't think God is paying attention anymore. And why? Because our leaders do not take into consideration the spiritual backbone of America. And I'm not talking about the religious right. I'm not talking about homosexual marriage. I'm not talking about abortion. I'm not talking about all these things that we say are wrong and against spirituality of America. What I am talking about are those things that keep us together as brothers and sisters in this country. The very thing that Martin Luther King told us about. The very thing that Martin Luther King dreamt about. The idea that the whites and the blacks and all the other colors and creeds would be together. But the only way we can be together is realize that we all have the same kind of pain. That we all have something to fight for. something to stand up for, something to look into our hearts and say, we changed the world and we feel better for it. We have taken our lives and we've used our lives to make men free rather than sacrificing our lives to make the empire greater. And this is exactly what the Bush administration wants you to do. One of the things that's very, very interesting about the times of Dr. Martin Luther King, the times of the Kennedys, the times of FDR and others, if you've ever gone back in history, I suggest you go back and you listen to their speeches as opposed to the speeches you get today. From George W. Bush, for example. I mean, it's not hard to understand that our president, as president, treats everything he does as a complete and total joke, and that he delivers speeches and doesn't think of the responsibility and the humility that comes with being a leader of the United States of America. Take a look.
And so, in my State of the Union, or my speech to the nation, whatever you want to call it, speech to the nation. I know that human being and fish can coexist peacefully. And America needs a military where our best and brightest are proud to serve and proud to stay. If you're a single mother with 2 children, which is the toughest job in America as far as I'm concerned, and you're working hard to put food on your family, rarely is the question asked, is our children learning? The docs are getting out of business. Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country. There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again.
The scary part is that, yeah, that's funny and everything. We laugh at what George W. Bush does, and he's a big clown. But see, this is the man who is ordering 22,000 more troops into Iraq. This is the man that tells you that Iran and Syria and all these other countries are out to get us and destroy us. This is the man, along with Dick Cheney and all of his other handlers, that is confirming to you, with reports every day, that this country is under siege by some great and terrible force, some nebulous ghost that we're chasing after. The perfect example of how this country right now is fighting a ghost war is the speech that George W. Bush made about wanting to go back in, and this was just a recent speech he gave to the nation where he said this. He said, "Victory will not look like the ones our fathers and grandfathers achieved. There will be no surrender ceremony on the deck of a battleship, but victory in Iraq will bring something new to the Arab world. A functioning democracy that polices its territory, upholds the rule of law, respects the fundamental human liberties, and answers to its people." The scary thing that he says there is victory will not look like the ones of our fathers and grandfathers achieved. There will be no surrender ceremony on the deck of a battleship. That means there's no end. There's no ceremony. We need ceremony. We need something to let us know that it's over. It's not over. It never will be over unless we declare it so. It's up to the American people to declare that the war is over. It's up to the American people to say something about this. Stevie, would you like to say something?
Okay, but as far as like there not being a ceremony on a battleship, how long was it? Was about 2 years ago when he declared the war was over? So he did like say, you know, on a ship right there, just like, yeah, war is over. So eat your own words, jackass. Bush, not you.
I agree. The mission accomplished. I give him a hand. That was great. By the way, if you're here tonight, give a hand to it. I mean, we're here all together, and whatever's said, we want to share our opinions today because Dr. King wanted us to all use our voices as a weapon of choice, and that's what we're doing tonight. There is no ceremony for this war, although he did go back and do the mission accomplished thing, which was just another one of those nebulous things where, as I pointed out before, it was similar to what was doing with Triumph of the Will, the Adolf Hitler thing. But see, one thing you need to remember about George W. Bush, real funny guy he is, always loves to throw new propaganda at you which encourages the siege mentality. Making up lies so that we can all be justified in what we do. Saying things like, well, there are weapons of mass destruction that we need to go after, and still, there are no weapons of mass destruction. And yet, he wants to just make light of the fact that everything that we went in to fight for in that country is either, like for example, Saddam Hussein hung, he was hanged, and yet that wasn't enough, we're still there. Osama bin Laden, he doesn't care about Osama bin Laden anymore, and he makes light of it. Weapons of mass destruction, another term that gets us all thinking, oh my God, we're under siege, the world is under siege from these horrible people. And then what does he do after we find out there's no weapons of mass destruction? Let me give you an example of what he does. Right here, take a look.
And with that, it is now my pleasure and honor to introduce the President of the United States, George W. Bush.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I present a White House election year album. This is on the way to the G8 summit. Once I got these trading cards, it's easy to remember the names of the foreign leaders. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
When does this end? When you decide it does. That's as I said before, and Dr. King said the same thing. You know, George W. Bush is a real funny guy. Very funny man. A man who basically told you all to go to hell if you don't want to have the, if you don't want the war to continue, go to hell. I'm making the decisions now. I don't even have to rubber stamp anything. I'm just going to say it happened. Dick Cheney the same way. Yet he jokes about the weapons of mass destruction and the soldiers that have died under his command. See, we need to understand that we need to somehow feel and understand that this is not something to laugh about. This is something that's really, really making us look bad. And when you hear people, like for example, there's a new movie out called Children of Men that seems to be very anti-American because of the situations that have happened that lead up to this science fiction idea. And people say, oh, it's so anti-American. Well, look at what they see outside of here. They see this. They see a president along with all of the elites sitting there. Lieberman was there and a few others laughing at these jokes, laughing at the blood and the death and destruction. Why? Because they have their little cremation of care ceremony every year where they don't have to care about life being destroyed. They don't have to care about that. Now we care about that because it's our loved ones that are going out there and putting their lives on the line for the king to get better. I mean, the whole idea here, the whole idea is fascism. It's a fascist dictatorship, dystopia, despotism. It's all there. And I remember there was a movie that had Charlie Chaplin in it. How many people are familiar with The Little Dictator? Have you seen the film? The Great Dictator, yeah. The Great Dictator, and he was in the film, and it was one of his first films where he spoke. And he played the part of Hitler, pretty much. And he was basically showing how the power can take hold of you to the point where, you can destroy everything you want. Anything from the brunettes to the blondes to the, you name it, he can destroy them. Blacks, whites, you name it. There's a scene, it's a classic scene I want to show you right now that I think it's Lionel Litwell is with him. It's kind of like a Dick Cheney guy, standing there telling you what he can do with his power. And I just want you to see this because we're going to wrap it also with a speech that Chaplin does at the end of the film. It's really amazing. But I want you to take a look at this. This is kind of a funny scene right here.
of the Jews. Wipe out the brunettes. Then will come forth our dream of pure Aryan race.
Beautiful blonde Aryan.
They will love you, they will adore you, they will worship you as a god.
No, you mustn't say it. You make me afraid of myself.
Yes, dictator of the world. Start the invasion of Austerlitz. After that, brought up the fighting of blood. Nation after nation will capitulate. Within 2 years, the world will be under your thumb.
Leave me. I want to be alone.
Out Caesar, out Nolus, Emperor of the world.
It's on the presentation, isn't it? That's fantastic. Charlie Chaplin's a classic. I think you should give that a hand. It's so beautiful. It's moving to see that because of what it represents, and that is that, they said, in 2 years the whole world would follow you. How many times have we heard, like when the war first started in Iraq, that they told us that in 10 years we will thank them for what they've done for us. That we will be happy for what they have done because they've made that small, struggling country a proud democracy, and eventually the entire world will follow into suit. And that George Bush would be revered as a man who saved the world, when in reality George W. Bush is a man who is playing with the world. Pretty creepy, isn't it, when you think about what that's all about, too? That we've been told that this is all going to be better for us, and it's really getting worse. The siege mentality continues to have its grip on us, and we follow suit, most of us, because we don't have anything to fight with. We think that we can't fight back, and I've always told you, bring it up in conversations whenever you go, wherever you go. talk about how his morality is not your morality. Being able to kill as many people as he's killed and do what he's done, I mean, it's amazing how we let him get away with it. And I don't think the world's going to let him get away with it. That's the scary part. And you are all going to be casualties because, as I have said before, it is the Blutkite, something that Hitler devised, the blood cement. We're all in this according to them. They don't look at us as people who are against it if we don't show enough protest, if we don't fight. They look at us as just a part of it, and we support it too. And it'll take another terrorist attack to solidify more of the Blutkite. It'll take something for us to all fall to our knees in fear, and that great dictator will play with the world again. Paige just put together a little something for us to watch, and what it is that he took one of Bush's speeches, and as I said before, it's all in the presentation, it's all in the speech. If you omit certain words in Bush's speeches, you get to hear the truth come out. You get to see what's really going on. And so he's put together a video that he's going to play for you, and some music and a little bit of speech tinkering so you can hear what is really being said between the lines. And here it is.
Our country must abandon the Social Security Act and the GI Bill of Rights. This is the broader definition of subsistence, because we cannot carry the message of bigotry and the baggage of freedom at the same time. We will bring all the habits of racism to our schools to serve the needs of our time. And as hope kindles hope, violence will gather, and we depend on your help. When our founders declared a new order of the ages, soldiers died in wave upon wave to fulfill the oath and excuse murder and multiply in destructive power. The survival of liberty in our land is a prelude to our defeat, and all the allies of the United States can know. We celebrate the reign of hatred and tyranny.
Shoot the apple off my head and trouble the
There we go. It's a little piece that played for me, the music and the sound and a number of other things. It's very, very stark imagery, and you know, this is where we are now. And I know that you know, we remember back to Kennedy, we remember back to King, we remember all of our other leaders, and how they brought us to a certain point where we had respect. But we aren't there now. The spirituality is faltered. It's like, you know, people are saying, well, who do we blame? Do we blame the president or do we blame the soldiers? Well, the soldiers are doing what they're supposed to do because that's what they're charged to do. Soldiers are out there doing what they're doing because they went in and they made a commitment. Our commander-in-chief is directing them. Actually, he's not just a commander-in-chief, he's more like a cult leader, leading people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, or telling people it's okay because we're under siege. All you do is you create a crisis and get people led to that certain area where they want to fight and kill because they're afraid that they might die too. There was a man who did basically the same thing. He's in prison right now. His name was Charles Manson. And I talked about Manson before here, and we brought him up because it just seems to me that what Bush does is no different than what Charles Manson does. So we did a little experiment, and we've talked about this before. And I've done it on the air before. People are fascinated by this. And I'm going to show it to you. It's kind of off a little bit, but I want you to look at this and basically extend your disbelief for just a minute. As I show you something, and you're going to feel a little weird about it. Take a look at this.
It's clear that you were guilty of murder, and yet he says in all his conversations with you, he never heard you express remorse.
What do you want to call me a murderer for? I've never killed anyone. I don't need to kill anyone. I think it.
You don't feel guilty at all.
There's no need to feel guilty. I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of. I wouldn't do anything that I felt guilty about. Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better. Maybe I haven't done enough. I might be ashamed of that, for not doing enough. For being stupid.
Isn't that a little creepy how Charles Manson, when you hear his voice with George Bush as the image, how the message seems to be the same? Doesn't that fascinate you a little bit? Maybe I should have killed 200, 300 people, maybe more. Maybe I haven't done enough. Maybe I didn't kill enough people to satisfy our bloodlust for what happened in 9/11. Maybe I haven't done away with enough people to show that I mean business. Haven't I done enough? It's odd, isn't it, the way the message is still the same. Why don't we replace the 300, 400 people with maybe 3,000 or 666,000 people? When is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people too many people? When does it stop? And when do we end it? You see, that's the creepy part. That's the creepy part. And he said, Manson said at the end, maybe people wouldn't think I was so stupid. Well, you know, most people, when they get to that point, they get to a certain point where they realize that they are stupid and they've done too much and they're willing to cash it in. Bush has not thought about that yet because we haven't made our message clear enough. Nothing's happened to get him to change his mind. But in the movie, The Great Dictator, he did change his mind. And Chaplin gives a speech in that film that I thought you'd like to hear and watch. Go ahead.
Just what you said a second ago reminded me of a quote. I don't know the exact quote, but it's something along the terms of, when 1,000 people die, it's a tragedy. When 10,000 people die, it's a statistic. And that was by Stalin. So.
Right. And the bodies keep piling up. And they just keep piling up, and we're remembering Martin Luther King today. Martin Luther King wanted it to end. We're going to get back to that in a minute. Get back to that in a minute. But what I want to play for you now is I want to play for you a speech from Chaplin in The Great Dictator, and this is a very, very good speech. If you haven't rented this film and watched it, I suggest you do. It's a very good film. Take a look at what Chaplin says is the final speech that he makes. It's an amazing speech. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world. Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill their promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
It's a great speech, isn't it? Really great speech. The sad part is that when Chaplin did that, he was criticized for saying that.
He's a communist!
He was a communist. He was a Nazi sympathizer. He was, you name it. They said that because he made that speech. And it's what we're leading to now, is Dr. Martin Luther King. And many of you that have attended the Ground Zero Lounges past couple weeks are recalling that I had talked about the King killed 33. Killing the King, the number 33, and how that's symbolic and significant. What's really interesting is there's a new movie coming out by Frank Miller called 300. And there's a poster that's making the rounds right now. And here it is. A God King Must Die. 300 coming soon. I told you this, and I tell you all of these weird esoteric things because I know that this is what they're preparing you for. Is yet another king kill. Another killing of the king. What's really interesting is as I was up here talking about the 33s and Saddam Hussein being killed and the number 33 and its significance, Many people that were here remember that the ATM shut down. It's still shut down, by the way. It says error 33 on it. A lot of other strange synchronicities happen as well. It's funny, but I went to my MySpace page the other day, and it was a strange night. 33 is still on the ATM. It's kind of weird. But what is the most weird of all is that when I left last week to come home from Dantes, I found a package in my mailbox. I was very blown away by the package because it was a book that was sent to me from Farrell House from a man by the name of Adam Parfrey, who I hadn't spoken to since 9/11 because that's when my show got canceled nationally. I received a book in the mail called The Carnivals of Life and Death by a man named John Shelby Downard. John Shelby Downard is the man that came up with the theory of the king killed 3-3. Now it's very interesting that Mr. Downard, I get a strange book about this, and Mr. Downard is the topic of conversation because many people don't know about Shelby Downard. Shelby Downard was in the KKK. And the reason why he wrote King Killed 3-3 was because he wanted to warn the world that secret organizations like the KKK, like the CIA, like all of the other strange groups like Skull and Bones, they operate with numbers, symbols, and ideas. That if you read the numbers, signatures, symbols, and ideas, you will find that they all work in patterns. And that the KKK, as with a number of other people, wanted to see a king die. JFK was one of those kings, and the other was Dr. Martin Luther King. A king, a God king, must die. The KKK, for those of you that don't know, the letter K is the 11th number of the alphabet. 3 Ks, 3 11s, add up to 3-3. We had talked about the numbers. The 11th letter of the alphabet is the letter K, thus 3 times 11 equals KKK, Ku Klux Klan. 311 is sometimes used as a greeting to demonstrate membership in the KKK, simply sympathy with the Klan and its ideology. There's also a rock group called 311, but they're not associated with the KKK. These numbers I was telling you about because that, for some reason, got a hold of me, and I had to talk about these things. I wanted to let you know that there are a number of kings that are going to have to die now because of all the problems that have happened in the world. And you're going to be seeing more of them, from Saddam Hussein all the way along the line. And there are others who are going to be speaking of peace. They're going to be speaking of reformation. They're going to be speaking of all these things, and they're going to have to suffer because they're talking against the emperor. They're talking against the fascist dictator, the leader. And this is where I lead you to the king kill of Dr. Martin Luther King. We're all told that the I Have a Dream speech is that speech that moved everyone. It's that speech that we all remember. I am now going to play you a video of what did in Dr. Martin Luther King. Here we go.
True revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, filling our nation's homes and with orphans and widows, with injecting poisonous drugs of hate to the veins of people normally humane, sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, and not be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love.
nation that continues year after year spend more money on military defense than on programs for social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Don't let anybody make you think God shows America as its divine, messianic force to be, sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you're arrogant. You don't change your way. I will rise up and break the backbone of the power. And I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. I call on Washington today. I call on every man and woman of goodwill all over America today. I call on the young men of America who must make a choice today. Take a stand on this issue. Tomorrow may be too late. Books may close. I don't know about you. I ain't gonna study war no more.
That was the speech that you won't hear on the nightly news. That is the speech that no one wants you to remember about Dr. Martin Luther King. Why? Because when he made that speech, he was called a communist. He was called a communist, a Maoist. It was then revealed that we had the FBI was bugging his hotel, that he was having sex with white prostitutes. All the smear campaigns that came about just because he wanted to see the war in Vietnam end. How many people watch the X-Files by applause? There's actually an episode called Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man. How many have seen that episode? It's one of the episodes that most people haven't seen. It's where it talks, the whole show is about cigarette-smoking men. And how he was involved with the JFK assassination, how he was involved with the MLK assassination. And there's actually a sequence where cigarette-smoking man is saying, I really love what Dr. King has to say. I really love what he does. And then all of a sudden you start hearing this speech that I just played for you. And he said, we can't have our Negro boys not fighting in Vietnam. And to hear what he has to say will turn everybody Maoist or communist. We're going to have to bring him down. Dr. Martin Luther King was shocked after he had made these statements, after what he said. And so I know that you're not going to hear that speech. But the speech you're going to hear on the news is the speech why everyone remembers Dr. Martin Luther King, and I don't want to lessen that speech by any means, because I had an experience the other night. I was out at a karaoke bar hanging out, and I met this woman, and I had talked with her, and it was funny. We talked about everything. It was kind of bizarre how we talked, and I was telling her about what I was going to do tonight. And she says, Clyde, I don't want you to think I'm kind of goofy or cliche, but every year I read the speech. And I go, the I Have a Dream speech? And she says, yeah, I read it aloud to myself so that I can remember Dr. King. And I said, how would you like to just come to my show? This is just a person off the street, a person I've only met once, talked with once. I said, how would you like to just come and let your voice be heard? Because that's what Dr. King wanted, right? Dr. King just wanted a normal person, just one person off the street, one person, to come and speak to a group of people and to share his message. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Jana. And Jana tonight is going to read you the I Have a Dream speech. She's just a person who is going to come and share with you Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Jana, give her a hand.
5 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize an appalling condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was not a promise that all men would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment and to underestimate the determination of the Negro. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolts will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. And the marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied. As long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality, we can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger ghetto. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that the state of Mississippi, a desert state sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that the state of Alabama, whose governor's lips are presently dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, will be transformed into a situation where little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. All flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith with which I return to the south. With the faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous peaks of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Jim Chaplin gave a nice one for us. video we want to share with you, and then we want you to think about what America is on Martin Luther King Day. Here is our...
Journey abroad, we will build a safer world, a safer world, a safer world.
American interests lead in the same direction. We stand in the
You only see what your eyes want to see. How can life be what you want it to be? You're frozen when your heart's not open. You're so consumed with how much you get. You waste your time with hate and regret. I work 3 jobs and I feel like I did tribute.
You work 3 jobs.
3 jobs, yes.
Uniquely American, isn't it? I mean, that is fantastic.
is a spiritual crisis in this society because of the dominance of the ethos of materialism and selfishness that people learn day in and day out in the world of work. And the terrible tragedy is that the right then analyzes that by saying the reason for this materialism and selfishness that's undermining loving relationships and families and so forth, that's because of the gays and lesbians and feminists and now liberals and secular humanists are all being put into this position. And that's why you are suffering in your family life. That's why you are in pain, because there is this selfishness and materialism surrounding us. Then the irony here is that the right, meanwhile, is the primary articulator and defender of the selfishness and materialism in the world of work. Because in the world of work, they are the ones who fight against the introduction of any criteria of social responsibility. They are the ones who continually say, do not interfere with the ability of each corporation to pursue its own selfish interests without regard to the consequences to anybody else. How do they get away with being, on the one hand, the force that opposes every piece of legislation that would restrict selfishness and materialism in the world of work, and on the other hand, being the articulator of the pain that people feel when the ethos of selfishness and materialism that they've learned all day in the world of work is brought home, as it inevitably is, in into personal life and plays out in destructive ways. How do they get away with working both sides of the street? The answer is they get away with it because there is no other voice in town. Because the liberals don't get it. They get away with it because the liberal and progressive forces don't even understand that there is a spiritual crisis, and in fact think that when people talk about a spiritual crisis, all they mean is that those are code words for racism, sexism, and homophobia. In other words, they take the rights analysis, and because they take the rights analysis, which is racist, sexist, and homophobic, they then say that there's no real problem. But there is a real problem, even though the rights analysis of the problem is wrong. Do you get it? Obviously, what is needed is a spiritual, progressive voice that can acknowledge that there is a real spiritual crisis, insist that that crisis has to be the central issue of politics, but provides a different analysis and a different solution. We need a new bottom line. The current bottom line is materialism and selfishness. We need a bottom line of love and caring. Today, institutions are judged efficient, rational, or productive to the extent that they maximize money and power. We are saying that the institutions should be judged efficient, rational, and productive not only to the extent that they maximize money and power, but also to the extent that they maximize love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical, ecological sensitivity, and enhance our capacities to respond to each other and to the universe with awe, wonder, and radical amazement. That's a fundamentally, radically different vision of the world. And it's not, doesn't fit into left-right, because the left doesn't articulate this any more than the right does. If we did that, we would see that almost every institution of this society is inefficient, irrational, unproductive. They don't tend to produce loving and caring human beings. They don't tend to produce ethically and ecologically sensitive human beings. They don't tend to enhance our capacities to respond to the universe with awe and wonder. No, it's not that we don't have a lot of loving and caring human beings. We do. We are that despite the institutions we live in, not because of them. The way to change this is not just to fight against media or government or corporations, is to also change ourselves to the point where we cool ourselves into articulating what we really believe in, to go for your highest goals. That is, this movement, the power of this movement is that we would say publicly what so many people privately want, but dare not say for fear that they will be ridiculed and humiliated for saying that they believe in a world of love and kindness, and love and kindness, and love and kindness.
This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance. Now the trumpet summons us again. Not as a call to bear arms, not as a call to battle, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Will you join in that historic effort? And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
As Dr. King said, you are the light of the world, and that he has a dream, and that dream is that we will all work together to make a better America and fight for what is right and believe in the spiritual backbone that is this country. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about judging people because they're homosexual or they do things that you don't agree with. What I'm talking about is the brotherhood of man and how we all should love one another and treat each other with respect and dignity and know that this is the America that Dr. King dreamed about. Yes, wake up! I know you all came here to drink and sing and do all that, but goddammit, we're Americans, and this is Dr. Martin Luther King's day. He had a dream. Let's not make it a nightmare.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
That's right.
You gotta really
Karaoke from Hell is coming up next. Thank you all for coming out to Ground Zero Lounge. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.